Welcome to Tower Talk Business Radio, where we bring you conversations with the top business minds on Long Island and around the nation every week. Featuring expert consultants and small business owners who have found success but are also willing to share their top tips, failures, and give gritty, matter-of-fact advice based on their firsthand experience. Now, let's get down to business on Tower Talk Business Radio on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hello and welcome to Tower Talk Business Radio, powered by the Nassau Community College Foundation. My name is Ray Schwetz, AVP of Business Banking at Jovia Financial Credit Union, and we're focused on being the premier resource for business and entrepreneurship. Plus, we bring you weekly business advice, tips, tools, and services that help you grow your business. And I'm very excited because today, providing us with business empowerment is my good friend Nicole Snurkowski. She's the CEO of Innovative Transformations, LLC. Nicole is a results-driven leadership consultant working with CEOs to deliver exceptional, sustained value to customers through a methodical and strategic process. So welcome to the show today, Nicole.
Good morning, Ray. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here.
We're very excited. So what I just talked about, that was kind of a mouthful. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself, and then we'll talk about what you do. So tell me a little bit about how you got started.
Well, the way I got started is I am a mechanical engineer, and I worked in aerospace for over 25 years in Pratt & Whitney, where they make aircraft engines, and their affiliate divisions, Sikorsky Aircraft, Hamilton Sundstrand, etc. I worked in all those companies, and time and time again, I was a sought-after resource to bring major transformations to each of those divisions. Mm-hmm. And it's because I spent 7 years studying very closely with the Shingijutsu consulting firm from Japan. These consultants were members of Taiichi Ohno's original autonomous study group. So I was fortunate, very fortunate. I consider myself blessed to have learned directly from them. And 7 years was a long enough time for me to become a master myself. And I've had many people refer to me as sensei. And I'm very proud to wear that title, and I've earned it.
I love it. That is so cool. And I mean, that's amazing experience that you've had. And that's one of the things I noticed about your mission. So why don't you tell us what your mission is?
Well, my mission is to help leaders at all levels become masters with breakthrough transformation. So in order to become really good at breakthrough transformation, you really have to understand the Toyota production system. A lot of people can read books about it, but until they actually study under a master, they really don't know how to take a brownfield and convert it so that it's state-of-the-art greenfields and flowing to takt time and beating their competitors' lead times.
Wow. Now, so what are those terms just for me, the uninitiated?
Takt time is a unit of measure, and it's if you've ever seen a conductor, there's usually a metronome going, and it's running to a certain beat, and it's keeping the orchestra all on the same page. Oh. Well, that's what you can think of takt time is at Toyota. The way that they had everybody working to the same beat was actually to have a moving line, and that moving line moved to the speed of takt time. When I went to visit their line in Japan in 1997, their takt time was 55 seconds. So every 55 seconds, a brand new car would come off the end of their line and be driven to the parking lot.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's what you're able to achieve with this. And I know how to take you from where you are today and bring you to that level of excellence.
Now, there are two terms specifically that you mentioned in your mission that I found very intriguing. And of course, me being who I am, I had to look them up. So, and I'm going to mispronounce it, I'm sure, but it's kaikaku.
Mm-hmm. That's
and
correct.
Kaizen. Okay, so I didn't do too bad.
No, you did great.
All right.
So kaikaku is fundamental radical change. Uh-huh. So if a company has maybe only dabbled in continuous improvement, made some minor changes going after the certain tools like 5S or TPM or something like that, that's more of a smaller change. Kaikaku says we're going to create a whole system, right? And we're going to put that in place. Much like what Toyota did to have a moving line in their plant, moving to takt time, it's the same thing. You don't necessarily have to have a moving line, but you have to have a way to facilitate moving all your product through your line at the same rate and everybody being engaged. So that's what Kaikaku does. It helps you create that state. Then Kaizen is the way you make minor modifications to it. So after you've built this big system, you don't want to go and do another radical change. You've already invested a lot of time. You should be, if you've done it right, very close to perfection. And then Kaizen is the means of changing it as the market changes, as condition changes. And also, if you notice in a Toyota, phenomenally, you would year over year be paying less for a car and having more value in it. That's what you get out of this. When you build a system that's already lean and then continue to tweak it, you're actually doing it cheaper and cheaper year over year.
That is fantastic. And so with Kaizen, there's 3 pillars to Kaizen, and could you explain that for me?
So the 3 pillars of Kaizen, I'm not necessarily attuned to, because Kaizen itself is such, as you can imagine, a small part of what I do. The big part is the Kaikaku, where I'm implementing the system, and then I'm just tweaking it. So those 3 pillars of Kaizen that the rest of the industry is teaching, I'm not gravitating to. What I gravitate is the 2 pillars of the Toyota production system and the foundation. So Taiichi Ohno communicated the Toyota production system as a house. So at the foundation of this house is Haijunka. And Haijunka just means level loading or production smoothing. And that's what takt time gives you, right? Okay. So if you're moving to takt time, you're level loading your factory. You have to be in order to be able to do that, right? So once you've agreed to adopt that and set that up so that your raw materials are coming in that way, now you can simultaneously build these 2 pillars. One's called just-in-time, which we're all familiar with, and the other one's called Jidoka, which is a little less known. Jidoka is automation. So it's making sure that we don't try to automate and take the people away. It's actually using the people to help advance the product to takt time in the most efficient manner. So when you build those pillars simultaneously, that's when you get the nirvana, if you will, the perfect flow.
Oh, wow. That is, I appreciate the way you explained it for me, because honestly, it was a little over my head initially. So tell us about how kind of this is all applied. What is your kind of your day-to-day with this? And if you could kind of explain along the way, like what are the services and how do you do what you do?
So when a client reaches out to me and says, I need to transform my business, the first thing I'll do is I'll sign a non-disclosure agreement, of course, and then I'll ask to see all their high-level data. I'll Pareto that data, if everybody's familiar with Vilfredo Pareto's way of graphing the highest impact to the lowest impact, at any level. So in this case, it would be volume of demand is what I typically start with, because dollars might not resonate the same way. So you want to see what are the dominant products that are moving through the facility, and then what footprint are they taking up. And so once I've helped them see what their dominant products are, sometimes they know, sometimes they don't. You'd be surprised how many times they just don't know.
Wow.
And then I'll show them how that links to the line and what they're doing, if they even have a production line. And if I see that the dominant product is taking up a small amount of their factory, and then the ones that are rarely done are taking up the bulk of their factory, then I know I can help them considerably.
Right.
To flip that over, right? Or if I find out that that the margins that they're getting, the sales revenue, is small on the dominant products, and yet it's larger on the ones that they rarely do, I'll help them flip that coin and say, how can we be more efficient with the ones that we get more revenue out of, and flip the facility that way.
And can you give me an example of maybe a client that you've worked with? You don't have to name names if you don't want to, but just to give us an idea of what kind of an impact this makes. Because to me, it sounds like a substantial impact is being made here.
It's very substantial. The best results I've had were when I was in charge. So that's why my mantra is to teach leaders at all levels, because I can't go in there, do it, and then disappear. It won't sustain. I really have to impart my wisdom and what I've learned to the leaders there. So I have them form a team and execute with that leader in charge. So one of the best scenarios I can tell you is I was a director of manufacturing. It was at Goodrich in West Hartford before they were spun off and sold to now Triumph. I had gear, shaft, valve, bearing, and heat treat all under my responsibility. And it was chaos in the shop because there were about 10 planners that were just chasing hardware, trying to look for where their parts were. And the root cause, after me studying everything for a month, I could see it was all due to my heat treat area. And it was because in addition to doing all the internal parts, the supply chain had negotiated deals with the suppliers saying, oh, you can't do heat treat, we'll do it for you. So there was all this demand coming in that couldn't be managed. So it was taking, we did a measurement to find out it was taking 3.5 weeks. And so with a simple idea that I got from skiing, which was, being on the quad, and how do you get the most runs out of the day? If you didn't know, you take the single line with your friends. You all go back to back, 1, 2, 3, 4 in the line. And if you're not waiting until you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over to the single lane, sometimes those quads are empty and you get on faster. So we found that we were getting more runs out of just going the single lane. So with that concept, I set up like a train schedule, if you will, and had the team organize the parts into different categories so that we could lump all the parts together and optimize the batch that was going in the heat treat ovens. So what ended up happening, just to fast forward it, because the team developed this, I was involved with the first day just to come up with that concept and to set up the organization for where the parts would go. But after that, they had to figure out how they were going to fit it into 5 lanes. And I just demanded that it get down to 5. They got it from 20 down to 10, down to 5 in 2 days. And then they actually put it into place. It was fully operator empowered. And they got it down to a 3-day turn time from 3.5 weeks.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. You are listening to Tower Talk Business Radio on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ray Schwetz, and our guest today is Nicole Snurkowski, CEO of Innovative Transformations, LLC. Now, Nicole, I'm thinking that your ideal clients are manufacturers, but can you tell me in your own words, what are your ideal clients? What are the clients that you're looking for?
My ideal clients are either open to change and learning new things, or they're fully aware of what they need to do, but haven't been able to accomplish it. Okay. And they're all manufacturers at this point. I really can help any time-based business, but the people that are really going to get the most bang for the buck are big factories. They won't even notice my fee. It'll be a drop in the bucket compared to the savings that I'll be able to help them get.
And it's funny because as you're talking, I'm actually thinking about, manufacturing. Obviously, to me, that makes a lot of sense. But I'm also thinking about the local bagel shop that I go to. It's so funny because I always say, we're online and there's this long line that wraps around. And it's because everybody does everything. So they're all kind of like hopping all over each other. And I imagine that also applies to manufacturing and other businesses. So these are concepts that could apply pretty much anywhere, I would think.
They actually do apply, and they already are being applied. And being a sensei, I can't walk into a place without understanding what's going on. So I remember walking into Dunkin' Donuts one day and looking up and seeing their tack time clock and seeing it start from when the moment somebody pulled up to place their order and timing them for how long it took until they were done. And then after the person drove away, I would notice a number would flash up to show the percentage. And they were only hitting 85%. So that means whatever standard they had set for the time that it should take, they're only hitting that 85% of the time. So I would work with them to make that 100%.
Yeah, that's pretty, wow. Now, can you tell us a little bit about how some of your work, I'm sure there's misconceptions about what you do, because honestly, when we first met, I was thinking, oh, you're a leadership coach. And I kind of categorized you there incorrectly, I would say. Because yes, certainly work of leadership, but there's some very specific things that you do that are extremely impactful. So what would you say is kind of the number one misconception people have about you and your work?
I think the biggest misconception is because lean is so overly used out in the world, and it's marketed by so many different people in so many different ways. Unless they've studied the Toyota production system, they might have no idea what I can bring to the table. So a lot of times it's not until they hire me that the light bulbs really go on. So I'm going to be challenged with sales and marketing this year to try to get that message out better than I have in the past. But that's the difference. The difference is when you hire me, you're not getting a set of tools. Like I'm not going to teach you how to do 5S. I can go into a whole rant on that or TPM or one of those limited tools. I'm going to look at your facility, look at what your challenges are, look at, do you need to beat your competition? What is your lead time? And if you don't know, I'm going to help you measure it. And let's say it's 12 weeks and your customer keeps screaming at you that it needs to be 8. And you're saying we're doing the best we can. Well, guess what? If they're asking for 8, somebody's giving them 8. So your competitors are giving them 8. So I'm going to have you beat that. I'm going to give you a challenge to get to 6, and we're going to get there together.
What would you say is there a common thread that you see with the businesses that you work with, a common thread in terms of the challenges that they're facing and what you're helping them with?
When companies were first initiated, it was either around a single product or around a certain service, a type of work. Like, for example, maybe they were drilling parts, or maybe they were machining parts in a different way, or maybe they're doing joining or forming. However they started the business is how they laid out their plant originally. And a lot of these companies never changed it. They added to it ad hoc, but things don't flow. From incoming to outgoing, everything should flow and be nice and streamlined. So honestly, that's where I think the difference is if a company wants to change, they have to be ready to do a complete overhaul.
Now, when you're working with these high-level executives, when you're working with CEOs, does your work look at only the process, or does it look at other things?
So it depends. If they hire me and they tell me they're very specific on something that they want, and this actually happened. I can give an example if we have time.
Yeah, please.
So I was hired by a medical device company in Connecticut, and they said they wanted me to conduct a Kaizen event in their facility. And what they were doing is they were actually making staples that go in the human body, basically. So they had clean rooms. And after a tour of all their different areas, I could readily see that their clean rooms, even though there was a lot of waste, if you were to Pareto that waste, compared to everything else, you'd see that it's nothing compared to the waste that's going on in the stamping. And the stamping is required for the staples, the metal staples that go into all their different types of ways of delivering those staples.
When you say stamping, I apologize. What are you referring to?
So stamping is you have a die in a press, and you have a piece of metal, and that the die comes down and presses into it and forms the metal in a certain shape.
I got you.
So that staple is actually done by a die in a press. And in order to be able to make that affordable, you really want to start up that press, run it, do a large volume, a huge batch, and then change it over to whatever new shape they're going to make. So as you can imagine, that's part of the problem is the large batches. So you need a significant amount of time to be able to prepare for that. So you have to do advanced tools like Kanban. Well, what I did for this company, they just wanted me to do a simple Kaizen. I went to their customer service end and looked at the lead time it was taking them to satisfy a customer. It was taking them 34 days just to get an order into the shop from after a phone call from the customer saying, I want this. I got that down to 6 days with the team. So once we were able to do that, now that put the pressure on, okay, so now if the customers want that and we need to be able to get that done in the shop, what are we bumping into? And so I convinced them to set up a finished goods strategy at the end for their biggest customer. It only costs $18,000 to do, which is, you can imagine, is a drop in a bucket for a big company. Yeah. We sped things up, put it on the shelf, and then I had them, and this was hard for them to get used to, but I had them work to a consistent 8-week lead time. So they would deliver the finished product off the shelf in 8 weeks to the customer that called in first, basically, and go in that sequence. And what that afforded them to do was now catch up in the shop, right? So even though they could have satisfied the customer today with the finished goods, they kept robbing Peter to pay Paul. They kept taking their inventory and depleting it. And now, so one customer would get an order fulfilled in maybe a day, a week, a couple of months, and then the next one would wait 12 weeks. So they were all over the place with satisfying their customers, so they really weren't satisfying any of them. In fact, some of them thought they were lying to them because, well, you just gave it to me in a matter of days, and now I have to wait 12 weeks, right? So I helped them get to the level loading through that finished goods strategy. And again, it only ended up costing $18,000.
Right, which, as you said, that's a line item for a company like that. Now, do you find that there's a lot of companies there, I mean, if they're manufacturing different products, or I know your strategy is that you're kind of working with the leadership to show them this is how you do it, and then it's sustainable. But do you find that you do return back to those same clients again?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I end up returning back to them anytime they get stuck.
Okay.
Right? And it could be for coming in for a quick coaching session. It could be coming in for a full Kaizen event. But typically, my favorite work to do is an actual contract where they're giving me their big, hairy, tough goal to say we need to get to this certain lead time, and I'll help them put entire production lines in place or lean out their entire facility, over time. So I'll lay out the high-level events that I see need to happen, and that will be tweaked as we go along. Many times, what I've mapped out, I can accomplish it faster unless we hit some kind of snag. Typically, it's the client that ends up not being ready. They'll say they want to do an event, and then life happens, and they have to push it out. And in the contract, we work with that. But bottom line, that's really the best way, because now they're committed to see that through, and so am I. And we're collectively working together to get to that nirvana.
It's a true partnership. You are listening to Tower Talk Business Radio. Our guest today is Nicole Snurkowski, CEO of Innovative Transformations, LLC. My name is Ray Schwetz, and we're on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. So we've talked a lot about some of the challenges that your clients are facing. So what are the challenges that you face in what you do?
So the challenges that I face, other than the physical one where, I'm still a small business, and the level of expertise that I had took me years to develop. And even though I've actually mentored and trained many individuals who are doing much better than me, they're VPs and presidents of companies now, I really need to coach them to that level before I can let them go off on their own to a client and do what I do. So my challenge is to clone myself multiple times over so that I can grow this business and service more customers. Because I have had a few customers say they wanted to have multiple events going on, and I let them know I can only be at one place.
Right.
I can do as many events as they want in one physical location, but I couldn't cover multiple locations at the same time.
Yep, that is a serious challenge. So we'll work on that cloning thing. Now, we're all a fan of top fives or top tens, and attention spans being what they are today for a lot of folks. But what would you say for you are kind of the top five bits of advice that you'd have for leaders?
So the number one is, if you're going to adopt lean manufacturing in your facility, don't make it based on event types like 5S or TPM. Have a strategy by prioritize product family for what you need to improve, and then work with a consultant that knows how to use the Toyota model to define and execute a full factory transformation. You will find that multiple event types are being incorporated at the same time this way, effortlessly and seamlessly. Don't use Kaizen. Sorry, this is number 2. Don't use Kaizen to eliminate jobs.
Yep.
You can reduce the amount of people required for a work area, but it should be so that you can redeploy the freed up resources to another location in your facility. So in other words, you should do this with a growth mindset, not a cost reduction type mindset. The third would be, don't manage schedules and work. Manage abnormalities. So if you don't have a standard out in your shop to compare to, then how do you know if you're ahead, behind, or on track to schedule? you'd have to go and dig and poke and prod the very talented people that you've hired so that you don't have to do this. So if you have a production system with standards in place, your job becomes to manage abnormalities. So you come out, you know what you're looking for, you see it, and if everything's running smoothly, you can walk right back to your office. And if something is not, you can start with the 5 whys and ask questions of, why it might be falling behind. You shouldn't jump to try to fix it because the team most likely already has recognized it and is working on it. The fourth thing is to have a formal sales, inventory, and operations planning process known as SIOP and link it to the lines that you have on the floor so that you can plan around any demand changes that are expected to be coming that are being communicated from the sales and operations team. So if you can adjust what's happening on the floor before these demand changes are actually experienced, it's a huge advantage. So I would highly recommend the development and implementation of a SIOP process. And number 5 would be learn the Toyota production model to the level that you can actually teach it. Then you can teach your people how to optimize their work areas. And then you'll be able to know firsthand how well everything's going.
I love it. That's great. All right. So what's the one thought that you want to leave our listener with? And please also make sure you give me your contact information where folks can find you.
The one thought I'd like to leave, especially CEOs and presidents of companies, if you can't stand in one place in your factory and be able to tell if all of your products are on time, behind, or ahead of schedule, then you really haven't properly applied the Toyota production system. And you're really leaving a lot of money and opportunity on the table. And so if you want to talk about that, you can give me a call or you can text me. My preferred mode is text at 860-334-7611. Excellent.
And you have a website as well. Can you give us the information on that?
Yes, I have a website, and it's www.innovativetransformations.org.
Excellent. So, Nicole, you've given us some great information. I was very excited to have you on. You did not disappoint. Thanks so much for being our guest today on Tower Talk.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So I'm going to leave you with Denisha Boston Hill's philosophy. Leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. Warren Bennis. We want to thank you for being with us. My name is Ray Schwetz, along with Denisha Boston Hill, your co-hosts and producers. Visit nccradio.org for more information. We are available on Odyssey, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, as a podcast on iTunes, Android Podcasts, and Spreaker. This has been Tower Talk Business Radio, powered by the National Community College radio station on 90.3 WHPC.